My stepson put lavender in my shampoo knowing I'm deathly allergic, and what happened next shocked everyone. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'm Ryla, and this is how one terrifying moment exposed years of hidden resentment inside my own home. When I married Damon, I thought I was joining a family that only needed time to heal. His son, Kalen, was quiet and distant, but I tried to understand him. I knew losing a mother at a young age was painful, and I wanted to give him the space he needed. I never pushed him, never tried to replace anyone, and always showed patience. But no matter how gentle I was, he never warmed up to me. My lavender allergy was something everyone in the house knew about. Even the smell could send me into a panic. I kept special shampoo in a locked cabinet because it was the one place I felt safe. I trusted that the people around me took it seriously, especially the two who lived under the same roof. One morning, I stepped into the shower, thinking it was a normal day. The moment the shampoo touched my scalp, a sharp burn spread across my skin. My throat tightened fast. I could barely breathe. I stumbled out of the shower gasping, the room spinning as my chest locked up. I reached for my phone with shaking hands and called for help. At the hospital, the doctors told me I'd had a severe allergic reaction. Someone had switched my shampoo. That moment changed everything, because deep down, I already knew who did it. When I first met Damon, I saw a man trying to raise his son the best way he could after losing his wife. Our connection grew naturally, and when we married, I believed we were building a steady home. From the outside, it looked calm and balanced. Damon worked hard, kept the house in order, and tried to give his son stability. Kalen, his teenage boy, seemed polite at first. He kept to himself, spoke only when necessary, and carried a quiet attitude that made him appear mature for his age. I thought he simply needed time to adjust. I tried small things, making dinner he liked, giving him space, showing respect for his routines. I wanted him to feel safe, not pressured. But the longer I lived there, the clearer it became that his quiet behavior had another layer. He avoided being in the same room with me, brushed past me without a word, and looked at me with a kind of cold distance that grew harder to ignore. He followed the rules when Damon was around, yet there was always a stiffness in the air whenever it was just the two of us. I felt like an outsider in the very place I was supposed to call home. Damon tried to reassure me, saying Kalen needed time, but the gap between us only widened. Every attempt to bond fell flat. He would answer with short, clipped responses or simply walk away. It wasn't open conflict, but a slow, heavy wall forming between us. I didn't want to replace anyone. I only wanted peace. But no matter how much patience I showed, Kalen's eyes told me everything. He saw me as someone who didn't belong, someone he never planned to accept. My allergy was the one thing in my life I could never ignore. Lavender wasn't just a mild trigger for me, it was dangerous. A small trace in the air could make my breathing tighten, and direct contact could put me in the hospital. Damon learned about it early in our relationship, and I made sure Kalen understood it too. I explained it clearly, showed them my medical notes, and kept emergency medication close at all times. Because of how easily it could affect me, I took extra precautions around the house. I used only hypoallergenic products, all fragrance-free and safe for my skin. To avoid any mix-ups, I stored my personal items in a small locked cabinet in the bathroom. It wasn't about hiding anything, it was about staying alive. I trusted that both of them respected that boundary. I reminded them often, not out of fear but out of necessity. Damon always nodded, telling me he understood the risk. Kalen listened with a blank expression, giving no sign of interest but never questioning it. I assumed the message landed. I needed to believe the people I lived with cared enough to take it seriously. Every doctor I ever spoke to gave me the same warning: one mistake could be life-threatening. That thought stayed with me daily, so I developed habits, checking labels twice, avoiding scented aisles at stores, washing my belongings separately. Life felt manageable as long as my home stayed free from anything harmful. For a long time I believed I was safe under that roof. I believed the rules I set were clear and respected. And I believed Damon and Kaylin understood how fragile my body could become around something as simple as a flower's scent. I didn't know how wrong that belief would turn out to be. When Damon began staying later at work, the atmosphere at home shifted dramatically. Kaylin's silent resentment turned into deliberate provocation. Doors banged behind him, sometimes so hard the walls trembled. He would pass by me without a word, his eyes flashing a quiet contempt that made my skin crawl. Every attempt I made to talk to him was met with silence or a sarcastic remark that cut deeper than I expected. Small incidents piled up. He'd leave messes in rooms I cleaned, move my things without asking, or mutter comments that made it clear he blamed me for disturbing his life. One night, he whispered, "This place used to feel normal," as if my presence alone had destroyed years of peace. I felt tension weigh on every corner of the house. Even mundane routines, dinner, watching TV, walking through the hall, felt strained and threatening. I tried to remain calm, believing his anger was temporary. I reminded myself he was grieving in his own way, that perhaps he just needed space. But his actions became harder to ignore. He stopped participating in family activities, avoided eye contact, and seemed to take satisfaction in making me uncomfortable. Even Damon noticed but shrugged it off, insisting Kaylin was just acting out and that time would fix everything. I began to realize this wasn't just normal teen behavior. There was a calculated edge to his hostility, a coldness that went beyond simple frustration. Every glance, every tone, every deliberate annoyance made it clear he had a target, and that target was me. That morning started like any other. I reached for my usual bottle, expecting the familiar gentle texture on my hair. Within moments, a sharp sting crawled across my scalp, spreading into a burning ache I couldn't ignore. My throat constricted, making every breath shallow and panicked. The room seemed to tilt, my legs trembling beneath me until I collapsed against the tile floor. Panic took over as I struggled to stay conscious. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking uncontrollably, and managed to call 911 just before my vision blurred completely. The seconds felt endless, each breath a fight against the tightening grip in my chest. When help arrived, I was barely able to explain what was happening, only able to whisper fragments about my allergy and the shampoo. At the hospital, the staff acted quickly, stabilizing my breathing and monitoring my vitals. I watched anxiously as they examined the bottle I had brought with me. The confirmation hit me like a punch, someone had deliberately tampered with my shampoo. The realization was terrifying. This wasn't an accident, it was a targeted act. Doctors explained that even a small amount of lavender could have ended my life. The gravity of the situation left me shaking in disbelief. I felt a mix of fear, betrayal, and anger building inside me. The place I should have felt safest, my home, had become a source of danger. I knew immediately that this was no random mistake, and the thought of someone intentionally putting me at risk sent chills down my spine. Returning home after the hospital felt surreal. Every step inside the house carried a weight I couldn't shake. I approached the bathroom cautiously, my hands trembling as I reached for the shampoo cabinet. That's when I noticed it, the bottle looked different. The cap was scratched, the seal broken, and the contents didn't smell the way it always did. It was obvious someone had meddled with it. I confronted Damon immediately, my voice tight with fear and anger. He swore he had nothing to do with it, insisting he would never endanger me. I wanted to believe him, but something in his tone didn't fully convince me. I needed proof, something concrete, something that would confirm what my instincts already whispered. That's when I remembered the smart lock on the cabinet. I checked the logs and my heart sank. The records showed the cabinet had been opened while I was asleep. The only person known to be awake at that hour was Kaylin. My stomach turned cold. I felt a rush of betrayal that cut deeper than fear ever could. The evidence was undeniable. Someone in the house I trusted had deliberately put me in harm's way. Every glance, every tense moment from before, every subtle act of resistance now made sense in a horrifying new light. For the first time, the distance I had felt with Kaylin became crystal clear. This wasn't teenage rebellion or simple resentment anymore, it was intentional, a calculated move to hurt me. I realized then that the threat I had sensed for months had a name, a face, and it was someone I was forced to see every day. I waited until the evening, when the house was quiet, and approached Kaylin carefully. I spoke softly, trying to keep my voice calm, hoping that what had happened was a terrible accident. I explained how serious my reaction had been, how close I had come to not making it. I searched his eyes for any sign of regret, any flicker of understanding. At first, he said nothing, staring past me with that familiar icy detachment. Then, his lips curled slightly, and he admitted the truth. He told me he had done it on purpose, that he wanted me gone, that I had replaced someone he loved and could never forgive. The words hit me harder than the allergic reaction ever had. Damon stormed into the room the moment he heard my voice raise, anger etched across his face. He demanded an explanation, shouting at Kaylin to deny it, to tell him it wasn't true. But Kaylin didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He didn't even flinch at the outrage in his father's tone. I stood there, frozen, feeling the weight of everything crashing down. This was no careless mistake, no rebellious act. It was intentional, a deliberate act of malice aimed at me. The realization settled in slowly and painfully. The person I had tried so hard to nurture and protect had been planning my harm all along. In that moment, a mix of fear, sorrow, and anger surged through me. I understood that I was facing real hostility, not childish defiance. I also realized that surviving this would require more than patience, it would require action. After the confrontation, Damon grabbed my hands, his eyes pleading. He begged me not to involve the authorities, insisting that Kaylin's actions came from pain, that he was struggling with loss and needed guidance, not legal consequences. He painted it as a moment of weakness, a misguided act from a boy still learning how to cope with life's hardships. I listened, but every word felt like a dagger. My chest tightened, not from allergy this time, but from shock and disbelief. How could he prioritize his son's mistakes over my very survival? I had nearly died, and the person I trusted to protect me seemed more concerned with shielding the one who endangered me. He spoke about therapy sessions, about family counseling, about giving Kaylin a second chance, as if none of this had put my life at risk. I tried to stay calm, to understand his perspective, but betrayal gnawed at me with every breath. It wasn't just anger I felt, it was the sinking realization that Damon's loyalty lay with the person who had tried to harm me. I realized then that staying silent would only empower them both. His insistence felt like another act of denial, another layer of the danger I had been living under. The home I had thought of as a refuge suddenly felt unsafe in a way I had never imagined. For the first time, I understood the choice I faced. Protecting myself meant going against Damon's wishes. If I wanted to survive and reclaim control over my life, I couldn't rely on the very person who should have stood beside me. It was a bitter awakening, but it marked the moment I decided I would no longer be a victim in my own home. The breaking point came quietly, in a moment that should have been routine. I reached for my emergency inhaler during a flare, and before I could react, Kaylin slammed the drawer shut. Panic surged instantly. My chest tightened, and each breath became a struggle. I tried to open it, shaking with fear, but he held it closed, a smirk on his face. For the first time, I truly understood how little regard he had for my life. When Damon entered the room, he saw what had happened but didn't intervene the way I needed. Instead, he lectured both of us about keeping the household calm and handling conflicts within the family. His words, meant to soothe, cut like knives. He acted as if my near-death experience was just another argument between a parent and a teenager. The realization hit me like a blow. My safety, my very life, was secondary in the house I called home. Every boundary I had set, every precaution I had taken, meant nothing when Damon refused to act decisively. I felt invisible, unprotected, and profoundly alone. That night, I packed a small bag, my hands trembling not from the allergy this time but from the enormity of what I had endured. I knew I could no longer trust anyone in that house to value my existence. Staying would only give Kaylin more opportunities to hurt me, and Damon's denial made it clear he wouldn't intervene. For the first time, I understood that leaving wasn't just an option, it was a necessity. My life depended on removing myself from a home where danger and neglect were entwined, and where my survival was no longer a priority for those I once loved. I knew I needed professional help to protect myself. I contacted an attorney and laid out every detail: the hospital reports, the cabinet access logs, and Kaylin's admissions during our confrontation. Each piece of evidence painted a clear picture of intentional harm. My lawyer listened carefully, nodding as I explained how close I had come to serious injury, and assured me that the law could recognize this as assault with a hazardous substance. Together, we built a detailed record. Every interaction, every manipulation, every moment of neglect from Damon was noted. The plan was precise: protect myself, create undeniable proof, and ensure that neither Kaylin nor Damon could endanger me again. My lawyer explained the power of documentation and how it could hold both of them accountable. The next step was formal action. I filed for separation, making it clear that returning to that household was not an option. The filing also included a restraining order, aimed not only at Kaylin but also at Damon, whose refusal to act had placed me in repeated danger. I wanted legal protection that could not be ignored, a barrier ensuring my safety regardless of their feelings or intentions. It was difficult, facing the reality that the family I had tried to nurture had become a threat. But every document, every official report, strengthened my position. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of control returning. I wasn't relying on their promises anymore. I had a system in place to defend myself, a shield built from facts and the law. This was more than paperwork, it was survival. Every signature, every record, every filing was a declaration that I would no longer be powerless in a place that had once felt like home. Court-mandated therapy sessions became the stage for truths I had long suspected but hadn't fully grasped. Kaylin sat across from the therapist, his posture rigid, eyes fixed on the floor. Slowly, he began to speak, revealing details that made my stomach churn. He admitted that he had looked up my allergy online, studied what could trigger a reaction, and intentionally chose lavender to make me sick. Every word confirmed the planning I had feared. Damon sat silently nearby, listening as the reality sank in. His face went pale, disbelief and guilt etched into every line. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that this was not an accident born from teenage frustration or grief over his late wife. It was deliberate, calculated harm aimed directly at me. Hearing it confirmed every fear and suspicion I had carried for months. The careful manipulation, the cold hostility, the moments of near disaster, they weren't random. They were pieces of a plan meant to intimidate and injure me. The weight of that revelation made the house, the family, and every memory there feel tainted. I watched Damon struggle, his voice trembling as he tried to comprehend his son's intent. He had protected Kaylin for too long, excusing behavior that had been dangerous from the start. The truth exposed the fragility of the facade we had all been living behind. In that room, the final pieces fell into place. I wasn't simply a target of anger or grief, I had been intentionally endangered by someone I was supposed to protect and nurture. And Damon's failure to recognize the severity of the situation only amplified the betrayal, leaving me more resolved than ever to secure my safety and reclaim my life. The courtroom was heavy with tension as the judge read the verdict. Kaylin would be placed in a juvenile rehabilitation program designed for young people with a history of violent behavior. It wasn't a punishment meant to humiliate, but a structured environment where professionals could address the dangerous tendencies he had shown. I felt a mixture of relief and lingering fear, knowing he would be monitored, but aware of the harm he had already caused. Damon's world shifted as well. His custody rights were suspended temporarily, and the court mandated that he participate in parenting classes focused on recognizing and preventing harmful behavior in children. It was clear that his inaction had contributed to the situation, and now he had to confront the consequences of prioritizing his son over my safety. For me, the ruling meant freedom. I could finally step into a space that wasn't shadowed by fear or threats. Moving into a new place, away from the tension and danger that had defined the past months, brought a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. Each item I unpacked, each corner I organized, felt like a small reclamation of control over my life. Sitting alone in my new apartment, I reflected on the events that had brought me here. The near-death experiences, the constant vigilance, the betrayals, they had all shaped me, but they hadn't broken me. For the first time in months, I felt safe, capable, and in control of my own future. The weight lifted from my shoulders was more than physical, it was the realization that I had survived something truly terrifying. I had endured intentional harm, betrayal, and fear, and I had come out alive, stronger, and more determined than ever to protect myself. Months passed before Damon finally contacted me. His voice was heavy with regret as he admitted how wrong he had been, how he had ignored the danger and chosen denial over safeguarding my well-being. He asked for forgiveness, trying to bridge the gap that had grown so wide between us. But I listened quietly, understanding that some wounds couldn't be erased with words alone. I didn't go back. Returning would have meant placing myself back into an environment where my safety had been disregarded, where my life had been treated as negotiable. Instead, I focused on building a life entirely my own. I found a small, sunlit condo in a neighborhood that felt welcoming, where every corner reflected my choices and my independence. I filled my space with people who truly cared for me, friends who respected boundaries, and neighbors who treated each interaction with kindness. Every relationship I nurtured was a reminder that I deserved safety, respect, and consideration. I no longer measured my happiness against anyone else's expectations or approval. My revenge wasn't about retaliation or causing pain. It wasn't about proving a point or humiliating anyone. It was quieter, stronger, and far more satisfying. I removed myself from the harm, built a life where I mattered, and reclaimed every piece of peace that had been stolen from me. In those months of rebuilding, I realized the power I had always possessed. I had survived intentional harm, exposed the danger, and walked away unbroken. My life was now mine to shape, free from fear, free from those who treated it as optional, and free to thrive on my own terms.